This is Support is Sexy, episode 499, with intuitive coach Carolin Hauser-Carson. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elaine Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm excited to have you here. You know, it just would not be the same without you. And if you're a woman entrepreneur who is looking for a way to connect with other women entrepreneurs all around the world who are there to support you, women entrepreneurs at all different stages of their business who can share advice, who can share your challenges, who can share your triumphs, then I want you to check out Support is Sexy Mastermind at supportissexymastermind.com. It's a global collective of women entrepreneurs who are, again, there to support you. supportissexymastermind.com. Now, today's guest is Carolin Hauser-Carson, and I love what Carolin talks about here. Really, what it made me think of is the fact that you have to be aware of your vibe. And vibrations, well, there's levels to this. So without further ado, Carolin Hauser-Carson. So Carolin, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So our first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
It was actually pretty late in my life. I already had my daughter. I'm from Germany originally, and I had moved to the United States and had my daughter when I was 29 and stayed home for the first year and had a lot of time to read and actually realized that I had always had trouble to figure out what I should do with my life. And coming from Germany, the concept of entrepreneurship is not as, it's like for very different people. It's like for the people that have factories, basically. Those were the entrepreneurs, So I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur. And so when she was little and I really wanted to find a way to be home and I started reading all these different books, I realized that, oh my God, that's totally what I am. That's why I could never fit in.
What were do you remember what some of those books were that sort of were the breakthrough for you?
I think one of the first one was The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T.R.F. Eker. Mm-hmm. Somebody gave that to me. Yeah, I think that was really one of the first ones.
For me, it was, I read several books even before this one, which are great entrepreneur books like E-Myth, Revisited, and some others. But the 4-Hour Work Week, the 4-Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss, though, let me know that the kind of life I imagine running a business, living in different places and all these other ways that you could do it was possible, that I wasn't too crazy, maybe a little, but not as crazy as I thought.
Yeah. He was definitely one of the ones too. Yeah.
So what were you doing what kind of work, I should say, were you doing when you first moved to the States?
Well, I am trained as a naturopathic doctor and humanistic psychotherapist. And so when I first came to the States, I actually couldn't do any of those because the licensing is very different. And so I came as a full-time student and through a college and was able to work through the college and actually cleaned the dormitories. That was the first work that I did when I came to the States.
You cleaned dormitories was it like work study while you were attending the college or just a separate job?
It was just, because I'm a foreigner. So through the only job I could basically get was through the college. And the only job they had available was cleaning the college after the dormitories after guest lecturers had come and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it's like, working for the maintenance department, basically.
Right. So at what point then did you sort of move into the kind of work you do today with helping women get connected really to their life's mission?
I have been doing that on the side. I did that under the table and never, for all the time, but I never made money at it because I just couldn't figure out how. So basically I've been helping people break through their blocks for over almost 20 years now. I'm turning 40 this year.
What would you say that part of you or that kind of work was always a part of you? So in other words, growing up, what kind of young person was a young Carolyn? Were you someone who was always wanting to help people sort of find their way or be the person that everyone goes to for questions? And I ask that because a lot of the women that I talk to, there's always sort of this full circle moment in entrepreneurship for them. Like, oh yeah, I was always like that. I always did like to do that. So what were you like as a young person?
I really was. I always dreamt that I was going to have a children's clinic. So I, for the longest time, thought I was going to help children and do something with children, but definitely, be in some kind of like healer capacity. And definitely, I've always felt a strong connection to, source or God or spirit, and have felt that I was here for a greater purpose. And then my dream for a long time was to be like, Neil Donald Walsh or Marianne Williamson once I got older. And, even though I was living in Germany, we still had their books. And those were the books I was reading when I was, when I was a teenager.
Right. So you were always influenced by that sort of being in that sort of space.
Yeah, I actually went to Waldorf School, and the Waldorf School is very spiritually inspired. And the founder of Waldorf School is Rudolf Steiner. He was a seer, and he not only founded the education, he also founded medicine and art. And so I was very influenced by him, and going to that kind of a school. And
was this kind of way that you seem to obviously have been very in touch with spirituality and healing? Was that encouraged in your family? Not that they would necessarily discourage it, but did everyone understand it, I should say? Because as a teenager, to be reading, Neil Donald Walsh and all these other people isn't necessarily common.
No, my parents were hippies, and and they got together really young, and then when they were in their early 30s, they decided that they had to find themselves, and went on all, my mom went to India and like spent time with the guru, and they went to tantric workshops, and we had all kinds of, my mom and my dad both, they brought a lot of the books into the house, and my mom also was a naturopathic, or was studying to be a naturopathic doctor, and so, that, and interested in homeopathy and energy. And, so, it was, while they were regular Germans, they were a little bit hippie, and it was encouraged.
Yes, that's great. I love that. I love that. So you sort of grew up in that space. You didn't feel at all like a misfit or like you were doing something different than everybody else. In general in Germany, I did, but not within my family. Within your family, right. Within your family. So at that time then, I know you moved to the U.S. and then got the job at the school and then moved into the work that you do now. But at that time back in Germany, did you have any idea of what you wanted to quote unquote be when you grew up? Did you have aspirations of being a healer, a doctor, or anything like that? Or did you have an idea of something else you wanted to do?
Well, for me, actually, I got very sick when I was 10. I got sick with anorexia and bulimia and suffered for 10 years. So actually, that's why I was reading most of those books, because I wanted to heal. For those 10 years, I actually didn't know whether I was going to survive, because the longer you're unable to shake that addiction, the worse your prognosis got. And so by the time I had been suffering for 10 years, my prognosis of recovery was down to 5%. And so for me, for the from 10 on, all I just wanted to do was to survive and find a way to just, be normal and be able to get married and have children. So that was really my biggest dream, And it seemed very, out of reach for a very long time. And then I had a wake up moment I think I was right around when I was 20 or 21. I had just eaten a whole bunch of food and was using a toothbrush to make myself throw up, and the toothbrush got caught in my throat, and I choked. And, for a moment I really thought, I panicked, obviously.
Right.
And I heard my mom's voice, because my mom kept saying, you're going to end up like Mama Cass one day. You're just going to suffocate yourself to death one day. And so I heard my mom's voice, and I'm like, oh my God, let this not be it. And then the toothbrush loosened. And from that moment on, I was very aware that if I didn't change something, my life was not going to last much longer,
Right.
And so I had an opening to really, I think because I was in an open space, I then attracted through my mother. My mother invited me to go to a Family Constellations workshop, and I was open to that suggestion. And I went, and within basically one weekend, and I received one session during that weekend, within 6 months, I was completely healed. The thing just left me. That's the best how I can describe it. And so with that, that basically set me on the path that I'm on today, because then people around me, I shared what had happened, and they just said, oh my God, like, if you need to look into this, you need to learn this. And I feel I owe my life to this modality. So I've been studying and immersed in it ever since.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea that part of your story, and or especially the turning point, I should say, with the toothbrush and what you experienced. I can imagine that I would have been panic stricken as well, not knowing what was going to happen. A couple of questions. What do you think, if anything, was there anything that was sort of a, for lack of a better word, a trigger for you when you were about 10 years old or so that you feel moved you into this space where you became anorexic and bulimic? Or was it just something that you just was always a part of your mind and your thinking when you were younger, of wanting to be, of whatever the reasoning was for doing those things?
Yeah, no, it never made sense, because my parents did end up getting divorced, but it was like when I was 12. And so it never made sense until in my late 20s, when I was 30, my daughter turned 3. With her turning 3, I started having memories of childhood sexual abuse come back. And so that basically when I, in my early 30s, then I realized why. And my first book actually is around sexual trauma healing, and a lot of the work that I do today is around that because that's part of my story. So I didn't really know why until in my 30s it all came together.
Right. You started doing that work. So tell us, you also mentioned that there were I know you went to the group with your mom, but you mentioned that there were maybe some specific modalities or things that really helped you sort of, as you said, it just sort of left you. Is there anything that you can share just for anyone listening who might be going through something similar, or know someone who's going through something similar, some practices or just ideas to think about of ways to manage this problem?
Yeah, I mean, back then it was really the constellation that helped me. And since then, I have spent, the last 10, 15 years finding ways. For a family constellation, you actually need to go to someone who knows how to do them and take you through the process. And I've been very interested in helping people and giving them tools that they can do on their own. Not that, there's anything wrong with going for help, but it's also, you're responsible for your own healing, and also you can. And so what I've come to understand is that almost every trauma, actually much more than a psychological impairment or impact, is an energetic impact on your nervous system. And so your nervous system is in your body, right? And so because your nervous system is in your body, you're the only person who can heal it, because in order to heal your nervous system, you actually have to feel the triggers. So basically you have to feel the sensations of the triggers. That's how you heal. So I always give the description of, imagine your body as a house. And when something happens, like, it could be anything, it could be just neglect, or it could be just, an accident, it could be any kind of traumatic incidents. And also we inherit these things. When that happens, it's like lightning striking the house. And when lightning strikes the house, you can imagine how the circuits melt, and how there's maybe a fire somewhere, and the circuits break and so forth. And afterwards, the electricity in the house just doesn't flow the way it would before. And when that happens, the house runs on way less energy. So when that happens to our body, we start running on way less energy. We're starting to feel depressed and starting to get sick and all of those things. And a lot of people think when they hear that they have, about healing, that they have to re-experiencing the lightning strike, and that is not true. You don't have to go back there. You just have to find the pieces in your house that have melted and have burned down and have basically been incapacitated. If that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. And especially that last part, the fact that you don't have to go back there. Because I think sometimes that might be the thing that keeps people from even exploring what may have happened and how they can eventually heal that. The idea of, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to think about that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And your first book is called Blossom, right? Your 7-step journey to healing childhood sexual abuse and creating your dream life. So I'll make sure that I link to that for everyone listening who might want to know that. We'll make sure we have a link to that. And I'm also going to talk to you later about your new book, Pleasure of You. Yes. So now, what would you say are some of the breakthroughs that the women who you work with experience when they allow themselves to, and I know this is important to you, get in touch with your bodies? And then what does that even really mean to do that?
It means that you're going to start making decisions differently, because your body is always in the present moment and your body always knows what's good for you. And so, people can have, and my clients do have breakthroughs in the areas of relationships. They have breakthroughs in the area of money. My own life has transformed completely from, going through bankruptcy, getting divorced with my first husband, not really making money with what I was sent to this earth to do. Like I was saying, I was cleaning bathrooms and things like that, to, having served over 5,000 people, having created a multi-six-figure company, being in the process of being so stressed out, I also got really sick. I had chronic fatigue and burnout a few years back. And so by really learning this practice and implementing it, your life can completely transform in a very short amount of time.
So what are some of the practices that you help the women you work with do? Are there specific things or a specific framework that you do?
So it's mostly around the pleasure IQ. I had a breakthrough breakthrough moment in my 20s with the toilet and the toothbrush, and then another one in my early 30s, kind of very shortly after I had written my first book and had a second child. I had a physical breakdown because I was just, my body was just not able to not sleep and be very stressed out financially and struggle. So up at that time, I had healed from the sexual trauma, but I was still struggling in many areas of my life. And I had a complete physical breakdown and left my body actually, and kind of was hovering under the ceiling and looking down at my body. My kids were on top of me and crying and not knowing what was going on. And all of it happened really quickly, and I was sent back into my body with the message that I needed to go into the pursuit of pleasure. And I didn't quite know what that meant at that time, but I just had this, you have to learn to make decisions based on what feels true to you and see what happens kind of, message from the universe. And I was also suspended in a state where everything just flowed for about 5 days, where there was no conflict, where everything that I needed manifested, magically. Like I didn't even know whether I thought of something or the thing, whether I thought of it first and then I got it, or I got it and then I thought, oh, it was just what I needed,
Mm-hmm.
So it was very apparent that everything that we want is actually already here, and the only reason why we don't have it is because we energetically put blocks in the way of it. And so with having gotten that insight, then I've developed a 4-step process that helps people, first of all, release the negativity that, usually the reason why we don't have what we want is because we're not quite a match vibrationally, right? We're not at a high enough vibration. And so one of the first steps is to release the most negative energy that we could have. And those are connected to shame and guilt. And there's people that can measure energy and frequency. And there's a scientist who no longer lives, but his name is Dr. David R. Hawkins. He came up with a scale of consciousness and he measured these vibrations. And so shame and guilt are very low. They vibrate around 20 to 30, at around 20 to 30.
Mm-hmm.
200 is courage. Everything above courage is life-giving. Everything below courage is life-destroying. So in some ways, our task is to get ourselves above 200 so that our lives start flowing better and there's better opportunities and better things are happening for ourselves. And so releasing shame and guilt is one of the biggest things, because those are the two things that I've identified that really keep us down, and they're not conscious for most of us. It's very ingrained in how we've been raised, and how we feel about ourselves, and it is very connected to our sexuality, and our sexuality is very connected to our true being. So it's all connected.
Right. So shame and guilt is, and also connected to, or holds us back from getting to the point of, or to the level of really having courage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now this is number one in the 4 steps
Mm-hmm.
in the pleasure IQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's number 2?
Number 2 is to integrate your feminine and masculine.
Mm.
So each of us come from 2 energy streams, basically, the father side and the mother side. And we actually do inherit DNA and trauma from our ancestors. So some of the time, the reason why we're not vibrating at the right level is because we still hold some negativity, pain, hidden loyalties to our ancestors. And then also, obviously, most of us, we still have conflicts with our parents, actually, and with ourselves, because we come from these 2 streams. And unless we are, at peace with our parents, we're not going to be in harmony with ourselves, because we're still rejecting part of who we are.
Now, when you say at peace with our parents, does that mean that there might be some conversations that we need to have, or just maybe some things that we need to let go of, something that we're holding against our parents for something we received or didn't receive when we were younger, or can it look different depending on the person?
Yeah, it looks different for everybody, but basically for each of us to come into a place where in the constellation world, we do believe that, and this is sometimes sounds controversial, we do believe that the greatest gift any human being can give to another human being is giving life. And so our parents have done that, and they don't actually owe us anything beyond that, because they already have given us the biggest gift. Right. So that obviously doesn't excuse people being abusive and so forth.
Right.
But at the same time, when we actually can fully get to a place where we're actually grateful for our life, then we can start being grateful for our parents, and then we can release them out of the, now that we're grown up, we can take care of ourselves. So it's a process, and obviously going through a family constellation, for example, can really help shift this within yourself really quickly, because just because of how the process works. But in essence, it's about helping yourself to become free, so that you can be who you truly are, and not, say, oh, I didn't have this and I didn't have this, and therefore, I'm disadvantaged in life.
Now, before we go to number 3, you mentioned this earlier too, family constellation. What is that? Can you explain what that process is like for all of us listening?
Yes, and I'm going to preface it with, you have to really experience it, because some of it is really very magical. And even though I've done it for 20 years, I still have a hard time explaining how it works and how, what it really does. Mm-hmm. But the way it looks, or it traditionally has looked, is I'm just going to tell you my first one. So I went to this workshop, and there were 16 people, and we all sat in a circle, and everybody had an issue. Somebody was going through divorce, another person had cancer. I was there because I wanted to get rid of the eating disorders. And so there were all kinds of people with all kinds of issues, and we didn't know each other at all. And when it came my turn to have my constellation, the facilitators basically asked, it was a couple that were facilitating, they asked me to pick people from the audience, from my mother, my father, my siblings, and the eating disorder. So I would then go around the circle and just intuitively ask somebody, would you be willing to represent my mother? Would you be willing to represent the eating disorders? And then if they were willing, they would stand up. And then after I had picked all of them, 5 or 6, however many I needed, the facilitator asked me to take them, step behind them, each at a time, put my hands on their shoulders, and then kind of move them in the room so that they would all be in different places. And this is actually where the word constellating is coming from, because you're basically taking elements represented by people and putting them into a spatial order according to an inner picture that you're holding of the situation. And then the facilitator basically interviews these people. It's a very investigative process. And the magical part about this is that even though these people are strangers, all of a sudden they seem to know everything. They seem to know everything they need to know. And so what we found through this work is that there is a field, and quantum physics is kind of talking about this, and spiritual teachers talk about this, that there's an all-knowing field, or that there's God is omniscient and so forth. And in this work, it's actually very experientially true, because As soon as you step into a representation, you know stuff that, no way you could have known before.
So like the person representing bulimia all of a sudden seems to know more than you would imagine about that.
Mm-hmm. Or representing my mother, my father, all of a sudden the stuff that you don't really, there could be issues that, I have clients that have issues for like their whole lives and they have no idea why. And then they do constellation and it gets revealed because whatever is the truth about the root cause of a situation will get revealed through this process.
Mm-hmm. Now, where are you when the different representatives of these different parts of your life are being interviewed? Where are you? Are you in the center, or you're just there next to them?
You basically go back into the circle. So the circle is they're in the middle of. So it's a big circle, and there's a big open space in the middle, and that's where the constellation takes place. People representing, and you're just going back to your seat, and you're watching this whole thing. And so there's theories on why this is so deeply healing because, we have mirror neurons and so forth, but it also is it is really a form of energy work. And it is a form of basically rearranging the particles, from an unhealthy picture to a healthy picture. And then when the particles are rearranged, you are out picturing in your life is a healthy one too. So for me, what happened during the constellation was that basically what came out, and I don't remember all of it, but what I do remember is that the eating disorder basically had kept me alive. In my life, my experience was it was killing me. I was thinking it was killing me and I was fighting against it the whole time. And in the constellation, what came out was that it was the thing that had kept me alive because it gave me something to do.
And if you had not had that?
I would have probably committed suicide.
Right. I see. You were able to see that once you went through this experience, seeing it from a different angle, really.
Mm-hmm. But then also, there's more that happens because, like I said, there's things that can be said and there's things can be really put into place so that the health and the system within yourself or within your family, within your work, with you and money, with you and your intimate relationship, with you and your body, the health gets restored. And then it's just a matter of time until it literally ripples out into the manifest form, right? So there's nothing that I had to do. Like I went to that workshop and I was like, okay, that was nice. And, I got the insight, but now what kind of a thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then, 2 weeks later, I would get a binge attack. I would go to the store and I would buy food, but I would only eat half of it, for example, and just have no interest in the other half. And so bit by bit over the next 6 months, it just literally, something that I had never been able to control with my willpower. And I had tried, I have a very strong will. I had tried to control it with my willpower, never been able. It just, the interest went away, the addiction, the thing, where I felt this thing had me in its claws and I couldn't do nothing about it. It just disappeared. Like it was just a true miracle.
Wow. Thank you for explaining that. I'm so intrigued by it. I'm going to, for everyone listening who wants to get more information, I'm going to, of course, we'll link to your website, but look it up also and see if people can find them in there, wherever they are. We have listeners in 130 countries. So wherever they are to find out more about it, because it sounds like it certainly is a powerful experience. And I haven't done anything exactly like that, but I did this workshop years ago that I talk about a lot called Momentum. And a lot of it is very much sort of experiential, different kind of, exercises, if you will, for lack of a better word, that we do that sort of, just as you said, reveal things to you that you may not have thought of, or you didn't see a certain way, or you don't understand how other people understood whatever it was that was blocked or there for you. So anyway, I just love hearing about those kinds of opportunities for breakthrough.
Yeah. And, like I said, it's, it took me 10 years of struggle and then one weekend.
Right. Like, why didn't I come sooner? Right.
I know. I can save you years and years of therapy or, yeah.
Yes. All right. So we were going through I got us a little, well, not off track. I wanted to find out more information about that. The pleasure IQ step number 3. Yeah.
Step number 3 has to do with connecting to your creative sexual energy and clearing, most people actually are not connected to their true sexual energy, not because you've had trauma. Even though a lot of people have had trauma, but because there's just so much shame and guilt passed down through the generations and, still today laid on us when we're little children. And there's a lot of confusion around what it is. Your sexual energy actually has nothing to do with you being able to have sex with another person.
Mm-hmm.
Your sexual energy is literally your life force and the amount of juiciness that you feel in your body, the amount of aliveness that you feel in your body, and the amount of energy that you have available to do things. One of my biggest revelations over the last 5 years is that in order to get stuff done, you actually don't need time. You need energy.
Right. Amen to that.
When I'm in a good space, I get more done in a day than other people get done in a month or a year. And when I feel like crap, there's nothing gets done.
That's so true. I have noticed that about myself. Sometimes I just have to, when I can, sometimes you need to push through if it's deadline, things like that. So not talking about that, but there are other moments when I say, I just don't have it today, whether it's going for a run or trying to write something, especially doing anything, at least for me, creative. It's just like, do not push through this. It will not be as good as if you have the right energy.
No, creativity is a high vibrational state, so you can't push yourself there.
Right.
You have to be in the right state. You have to have spaciousness. You have to feel good.
Yeah, and that's not even, tell me if I'm wrong, but for me, I've noticed too, it's not just when we say energy, at least for me, I don't even just mean tired. I might not be tired, but for whatever reason, the energy is just, the connection just is not there.
Yeah, it's just kind of meh.
Yeah, exactly. That's the word, meh. Exactly. All right. So it's step number 4.
And then step number 4 is learning to have routines and learning how to maintain a high vibrational state.
Simple enough. Now, one of the things you mentioned earlier that I meant to highlight was that with your own experience about thinking that you have the willpower to do something or to stop doing something, but then needing some of this other support around it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I don't know if you've worked with your clients through that or just your idea about that. It's not just about willpower. Sometimes people think if you have the willpower to make a change or to do something, that'll be enough.
Yeah, so there's several things to this. First of all, everything that we want is already actually here. We never manifest anything. So while we can, through efforting, make some things happen, in reality, it's when we do that, it usually comes at a price. When we use force, basically, it comes with a price, and it's usually our health or our relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we know that, then what it's really about is to learn the right use of the will. Instead of, basically using our will and forcing it onto the universe, the best use of the will is to use your will over your own self. And I'm trying to explain this and make it really simple. So the best use of your will is to use it with your own discipline in terms of your energy management. At any given time, we actually have a choice whether we go down a negative energetic road or a positive energetic road. And this takes tremendous, staying awake to that choice takes a lot of willpower. But to stay awake and to use your will for that, to me, that's the right use of the will, because ultimately it will help you become free and get into a space where you are in alignment, where you're living in a high vibrational space, where you're living your full potential and all those things. But it is really, it's like winning Olympic gold. There's a reason why I think 80%, and again, these are not my numbers, but I think 80 or 90% of the entire population, so chances are you're listening, you're not one of them, 80 to 90% of the population actually vibrates below 200, right? There's very few people that get above 200, and then even, I think it's 1 in a million who gets over 500. 600 is where you're basically at peace, where your experience is one of peace and bliss and things flow in your life. That's where we want to get to, basically, in some ways.
And that's from the scale of consciousness that you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to look that up, make sure we link to that too. Why do you think why do you think the number is as high as it is of people who do not vibrate above 200? Is it because we're just moving through life on autopilot? We're not aware that we're having low vibration, or what do you think it is? What have you either seen or just your idea about it?
Yes, and I do think, there's people in power who know, there's people in power who are pretty high vibrational and they know these things, and they have kept the rest of us working so hard that we didn't even have the time or the luxury to start thinking about this, right?
Right. People say
and
that about the law of attraction too. It was a secret for so long, right?
Yeah, and so you just, when you look at, why did we have to put so much? So sexuality can be something super pleasurable and enjoyable. Why did it have to become something that's so full of sin, basically, right? It's just one way. It's a big way how we got disempowered as a whole race, basically. With making the thing that's freely available to us forbidden, kind of where we could experience pleasure. And so most people, the experience is one of guilt-riddenness, shamefulness, and complete struggle for survival. And when you're in that space, it's very hard to even consider anything else because you're literally just fighting for survival all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned earlier that your business, that you were able to grow your business to a six-figure, did you say six-figure business now? Multiple six-figure business. That's right, Carolyn. Multiple six-figure business. So I'm curious, have you been doing that mainly through one-on-one working with clients, for anyone who has, even if not necessarily a business exactly like yours, which none are exactly alike, right? But something where they're either consulting or through therapy or supporting people in that way. How have you been able to, or what has worked for you as far as building your business over the past, 10 years now?
Really successfully for the last 4
years. What has worked?
What I like doing most is I run groups. So I have a high-level mastermind with about 10 women every year.
Mm-hmm.
And it includes weekly calls, and then we have 3 retreats throughout the years. I'm also doing standalone retreats for people that don't want to be in a year-long anything, that just want to come and do a 4-day deep dive and just basically come, transform their energy and get some tools on the way, and then have a little bit of follow-up afterwards. So I'm moving more and more into doing that. Obviously, I have the book and I have online courses, and I do have a few. My highest level is one-on-one, but it just depends. Sometimes I do intensives with people, and sometimes I have had people that stayed with me for an entire year. But I generally only have 3 people like that. 3 people that I work one-on-one,
right?
And the rest is a group.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that with us. So the combination of your courses, the retreats sound like they've been very powerful for your clients, people who work with you, and for the business, and then the year-long mastermind too. Right. Is your mastermind, is the enrollment only at a certain time of year?
No, it's open. It's
open. Oh, that's great.
Until it's, sometimes I'm full and then I can't take anybody.
Of course.
Yeah. So it depends. Yeah.
Excellent. So people can find out more about that on your website as well, right? About all of those. Okay, good. Now, what would you say then for your business? What is the vision for the impact that you hope to have in the world through your business or through your work in general?
My vision is to impact at least 1 million people. I want to sell at least 1 million of my books and speak and travel and host retreats in beautiful places and take women with me. And ultimately, I would like to start also hosting couples retreats together with my soulmate. So my first husband wasn't really my soulmate. We got married and we had the children, and that was all good. But it took me a little longer to really find my true soulmate, which has happened, and we're together now. And so with him, I also would like to, in the future, do couples retreats coming back to the children, I still feel very much drawn that part of my mission is to either, create an orphanage or create a house for single mothers where they can come with their babies for the first couple of years. And so something like that is really something we want to build in the future. And coming back to my childhood dream where I felt like I was really here to help the children.
Right. Full circle.
Yeah.
Told you, mentioned that earlier, full circle.
Yeah.
What would you say that entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
It's given me permission to be myself, because coming from Germany, I never fit in and I really didn't know how I was going to make money. And it just seemed, it took me till I was 35, basically, till I made, I never made more than $7,000-8,000 a year with odd jobs here and there, and some sessions, single sessions, a few, like 10 a year maybe. And so it just really gave me permission. It gave me a way to be myself and make money just as myself, and really good money.
Really good money. I'm curious, did you have any blocks at all or anything revealed to you about the either the ability or just the belief that you could make a good amount of money, lots of money? Because I ask that because sometimes some of us have these, whether we know or not, and I talk to a lot of women about this, about whether it's pricing or just no one would ever pay me that much, or how could I charge this, or it'll never, whatever the things are that we have about money, especially for our services, and especially when we're doing, like you, healing kind of work. I just spoke to someone about that, these different hangups around money. So I'm interested in knowing if you had either any kind of blocks that you knew about or any kind of breakthrough that you can share with people about how to move beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had a lot of blocks. Otherwise, I would have made money earlier.
Right.
So for me, my breakthrough actually came with when I left my marriage, when I left my first husband.
Mm-hmm.
There was no financial support because he's an artist, he's a writer. So he has enough to support himself, but not me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I started practicing doing what feels right and good for me, that meant to say, I'm going to leave, not knowing how I was going to support myself, and still recovering from chronic fatigue and having 2 small children and living away from my family. And I still did it, because it felt right. And so I had no choice. I had to make money. Within that first month that I left him, I had to come up with $5,000 basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I had studied law of attraction, and I did see people around me making money, and I knew I was really good at what I was doing. I felt literally I was cursed with money. I just felt like I was completely cursed with money. I just did not know how to make it. But I did have a belief that it was possible for other people, and I did believe that I was really good, and I needed to make $5,000. So in my head, and I only had 10 hours I had 15 hours of childcare, and 10 of those 15 hours I had to put into my own self-care just to not, to get better because I was still so sick. And so then in my mind, I was like, okay, I have 5 hours a week. Even if I went and got a job at, $20 an hour, what's that, $100 a week, living in Santa Barbara, where I live in California, you need $5,000 just to survive. So nothing made sense other than selling something, at like $2,500 or something. So in some ways I got lucky because I just had to in order to survive, I had to sell something at $2,500, which then I did.
What did you sell? Was it a course or something like that?
I basically sold a 3-month package around helping people find their purpose.
Wow.
And I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I knew that I had the constellations, and I knew that I was good at facilitating people through their process. I've never gone to coaching school or anything like that. And then I just really stuck with the 4th step of the pleasure IQ, which is the practices that I've developed to stay in a high vibrational space.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because so everything is already here. If you imagine your life as a 6-story house, everything that you want is literally on the 6th floor. And then, most of the stuff you want is on the 5th floor. A lot of the stuff that you want is on the 4th floor. A good amount of stuff that you want is on the 3rd floor. And then it gets less and less and less. And so I knew that. And I knew that if I could get myself somewhere, energetically to the 3rd or 4th floor, something would happen and I would have the clients. And so that's why I put so much time into my self-care and just helping myself to feel good and doing these energetic practices. And then the synchronicity started to happen. It was very stressful, but I didn't, that's where I really had to use my willpower and not allow myself to start, going into anxiety, I basically just, my only thought was, this has to work. This has to work. I can't allow myself to think about anything else. This has to work. because otherwise I would have had to go back to Germany. And I love my parents, but I really don't like living there. It's too cold and people are too grumpy for me. Maybe that has changed since I left, but and I really didn't want to be homeless. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. I actually got goosebumps. The idea of, well, I think it's a Damon John's book, or I think it's his book called The Power of Broke, but just that sort of back against the wall kind of thing. I have to figure this out. How am I going to make this possibility become a reality? But even I've been in, I would say over the past year, I mean, I've had a coach and a lot of other people who have come in to support me in different ways, but just this idea of, like you said, the vibration. I love the idea of the house on the 6th floor is what you're trying to get to. But just being in that space of, I'm going to figure it out. It's going to work. I always say, let go of the how. You don't know exactly how. I'm sure you didn't know exactly how, but just have to be in that space. Of course, doing the work and creating things as you did and all of that. But for everyone listening, you don't know exactly how it's going to work out. But if you know that especially if it needs to work out for your survival or for whatever, survival of your business, yourself, your family, you have to still try to stay in that space, or not even try, right? Use your willpower to stay in that space, as you said. And I think for you, what's so powerful, I mean, about your story too, is that you mentioned you used a portion of that time for self-care. Sometimes we all just make all of it be focused on the work instead of making sure that we're at a high vibration, taking care of ourselves and those things. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Excellent. So in closing, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
I think it would be my mother. You know, I would thank her for not giving up on me. And even though, you know, we were very at odds during that time, and she still was courageous enough to invite me to think and things. And, you know, she got a lot of rejections from me too during that time. So, yeah.
Excellent. Mom. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. And my dad too, obviously.
And your dad too, obviously. So what would you say, Carolin, are the ways that we can support you? Of course, I said I'll have links to your website and all these other great resources that you mentioned, but anything you want us to know about?
I do have a free, so my whole brand is Women in the Flow. My website is womenintheflow.com, and I have several tools on there that you can download that will teach you how to work with your energy. And also, you know, this is not about stuffing your emotions to the side and pretending they're not there. There's tools that you can use so that you can actually work with your emotions and use them in a productive way. So go to my website and check that stuff out, and then join my free Facebook group. That's also called Women in the Flow, and I do daily Facebook Lives. I do energy work every morning in that group for 10 minutes so that people can start their days in an aligned way. And I love being on other podcasts. So if you were listening to this and you think I could be a good guest for somebody else, let me know.
Oh, excellent. I know tons of podcasters. I'll make sure I let you know.
Awesome. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. So womenintheflow.com.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your story so openly and vulnerably and powerfully, and letting me dive into some different areas deeper. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for the great questions.
Of course. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
So we don't have power over other people. We don't have other power over circumstances, but we do have power over our own energetic state, kind of what we talked about with the willpower. To remember that is where your power lies. Your power lies in you helping you and your body, because your body is you, right? Your body is a big piece of vibrational real estate, and there's many ways that you can help your body to be in a high vibrational state, whether it be through good eating, you know, through exercise, and in all the energetic ways. But to remember that that's where your power is. Your power is over your own energetic space, and when you start really practicing this and mastering this, your life is going to transform completely. You don't need to do anything else.
Excellent. Would you also say, one last thing, would you also say too that we have to be willing to let some things go to be at a certain vibration, some things and maybe some people?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
It's part of cleansing and clearing.
Part of cleansing. There you go. Carolin said it, not me. I try to remind people that sometimes you have to let some things go. They might come back later, but sometimes you have to let it go. All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Carolyn and that last piece of advice. Sometimes you just gotta let it go. Now, to find out more about her, to find out what she's up to find out more about the Family Constellations, which I was very curious about, just go to supportissexypodcast.com, go to that search icon at the top, and type in Carolin, Carolin. Her show notes page will pop up with links and resources and ways to get in touch with her. supportissexypodcast.com and search Carolin. Please make sure that you and I are connected on social media at Elaine Fluker at Support is Sexy. I love connecting with you there, seeing what you're up to, hearing what you're up to, hearing how the podcast influenced you, inspired you, motivated you, pushed you to do something outside of your comfort zone. I want to make sure we're connected. So if you're listening, tag me on Instagram. If you use it in Instagram story, let me know that you're listening, or anywhere else that you spend time on social media. Support is Sexy and at Elaine Fluker. All right, so thank you so much for listening. As always, I appreciate you. And until we chat next time, remember that you deserve support. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.